South Florida. For decades, it's been a magnet for dreamers, retirees, and strivers. A place where a middle-class family could find a foothold, a starter home, under the sun. But that dream is undergoing a radical transformation. In just 5 years, the number of homes available for what was once a solid budget, under $500,000, has plummeted by nearly 80%. This is not just a market shift, it's a fundamental rewriting of who gets to live here. South Florida. For decades, it's been a magnet for dreamers, retirees, and strivers, a place where the promise of sunshine was matched by the promise of opportunity. From the post-war boom to the dawn of the new millennium, this was a landscape where a middle-class family could not just survive, but thrive. They could find a foothold, a starter home, a piece of the American dream, all under the warm, subtropical sun. The narrative was simple and powerful. Work hard, save your money, and you could buy a home, build equity, and secure a future for your children. This wasn't a fantasy. It was the lived reality for generations who flocked to the coasts of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, building communities one single-family home at a time. But that dream, the very foundation of South Florida's middle-class identity, is undergoing a radical and painful transformation. The promise has been replaced by a price tag, and the open invitation has become an exclusive club. In just 5 years, a seismic shift has occurred beneath the surface of the market. The number of homes available for what was once a solid, achievable budget, under $500,000, has plummeted by a staggering, almost unbelievable 80%. Let that number sink in. 4 out of every 5 doors that were open to a family with a $500,000 budget in 2019 are now shut, locked, and priced far beyond their reach. This is not just a market shift, a cyclical fluctuation that will correct itself over time. This is a fundamental rewriting of the social contract, a redrawing of the lines that determine who gets to live here, who gets to build a life here, and who is forced to look elsewhere. It's a story about the hollowing out of the very communities that gave this region its character. To understand the sheer scale of this crisis, we have to look past the anecdotes and dive into the cold, hard numbers. This is the data shock. We sat down with a local housing data analyst who has been tracking this phenomenon. The graphics on their screen tell a stark, brutal story. A line graph representing the inventory of homes under $500,000 in Miami-Dade County doesn't just dip, it falls off a cliff. In 2019, there were thousands of listings, single-family homes, condos, townhouses, that a teacher, a firefighter, or a small business owner could realistically aspire to own. By 2024, that inventory has been decimated. What was once a vibrant market segment is now a barren wasteland. And when the 80% figure is broken down by neighborhood, the picture becomes even more granular and more devastating. In traditionally middle-class strongholds like Kendall or Hialeah, the number of affordable single-family homes has all but vanished. Even in Homestead, long considered the last bastion of affordability in the county, prices have soared, pushing the dream further and further south. The data shows a clear pattern. The affordable starter home, the bedrock of generational wealth for so many, is now an endangered species. What's left in that under $500,000 bracket is now overwhelmingly composed of smaller condos, often with high association fees, that add another layer of financial strain. So how did this happen? How did a stable market unravel so quickly and so completely? It wasn't one single event, but a perfect storm, a confluence of powerful forces that converged on South Florida with unprecedented intensity. First, there was the pandemic pivot. As the world locked down, a new breed of homebuyer emerged. Armed with six-figure salaries from tech and finance jobs in high-tax, high-cost states like New York and California, these remote workers saw South Florida as a sun-drenched paradise with a favorable tax code. They brought with them not just their laptops, but enormous buying power and a willingness to pay cash, far above the asking price. Local buyers, relying on traditional mortgages and local salaries, found themselves hopelessly outgunned in bidding wars they never stood a chance of winning. Next came the investor invasion. It wasn't just individuals. Wall Street saw an opportunity. Private equity firms, institutional investors, and iBuyers descended on the market, armed with billions in capital. They began buying up thousands of single-family homes, not to live in, but to hold as assets in a portfolio. For them, houses weren't homes, they were entries on a spreadsheet. commodities to be bought, rented out, and sold for maximum profit. This corporate consolidation of housing stock removed thousands of potential starter homes from the market, converting them into rental properties with ever-increasing monthly rates, further squeezing the very people who were trying to escape the rent trap. This influx of capital was encouraged by the safe haven effect. For years, Florida has actively courted the wealthy with its lack of a state income tax and a political climate seen as pro-business. This strategy, while successful in attracting wealth, had the unintended consequence of superheating the housing market. The state became a global destination for capital seeking a secure and profitable home, turning local housing markets into international investment vehicles and pricing out the local workforce in the process. While demand was exploding, the supply side was being crippled. The pandemic shattered global supply chains, causing the cost of essential building materials like lumber, steel, and concrete to skyrocket. We spoke with local builders who described a nightmare scenario. Prices for materials changing week to week, and a severe shortage of skilled labor driving wages to unprecedented levels. These soaring costs meant that building a new, affordable starter home became a financial impossibility. Developers were forced to build luxury properties to have any hope of turning a profit. And then came the final devastating blow, the insurance crisis. As climate change fueled more powerful hurricanes, and rampant litigation plagued the industry, insurance companies began fleeing the state in droves. Those that remained hiked their premiums to astronomical levels. We interviewed one homeowner whose bill was a perfect illustration of this nightmare. She showed us her premium increase, a jump from a manageable $3,000 a year to a crippling $12,000. This crisis added tens of thousands of dollars to the long-term cost of homeownership, creating a new barrier so high that it could disqualify a buyer even if they found a home they could afford. It's a hidden cost that has become a deal-breaker for countless families. Behind these statistics, charts, and market forces are real people. People who form the backbone of our communities, people whose lives are being upended. This is the personal story of one such couple. She is a Miami-born elementary school teacher, dedicating her life to educating the city's next generation. He works in hospitality, an industry vital to the local economy. For years, they did everything right. They worked second jobs, they lived frugally, they diligently saved every spare dollar for a down payment on a small home. Their dream wasn't extravagant, a two-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood, a small yard, a place to start a family in the city where she was born and raised. They watched their savings account grow and with it, their hopes. But as they began their search, they watched in horror as their target neighborhood slipped away, one by one, priced out in a matter of months. Every weekend was a blur of open houses, each one more crowded and frantic than the last. They would find a home, stretch their budget to its absolute limit, and make a strong offer only to be beaten by an all-cash buyer from out of state, sight unseen. Their down payment, once a source of pride, began to feel insultingly small. The goalposts weren't just moving, they were being airlifted to a different planet. The emotional toll was immense, a cycle of hope, anxiety, and crushing disappointment. After 2 years of fruitless searching, they made a heartbreaking decision. The dream of owning a home in their own city was dead. They are now packing their lives into boxes, not to move into a new home, but to leave South Florida entirely. They're considering leaving the state, joining a growing exodus of essential workers, of local families, of the very soul of the community, all priced out of paradise. Their story is not unique. It is the story of thousands, a quiet tragedy unfolding in the shadow of the gleaming new towers. It begs the question, when the teachers, nurses, and service workers can no longer afford to live here, what kind of community is left? As Miami's gates closed, the search for affordability pushed north. The Broward boom, data visualization showing the migration pattern from Miami-Dade to Broward County. Fort Lauderdale's price surge is highlighted. Personal story 2. A young professional couple from Miami touring a modest, overpriced home in a Fort Lauderdale suburb.
I have to be honest. This will likely get at least 10 offers. Most of them will be over asking, and probably a few will be cash.
The new reality in Fort Lauderdale. Interviews with Fort Lauderdale longtime residents feeling the squeeze, property taxes, gentrification, the changing character of their neighborhoods. A city planner discusses infrastructure strain. Is this sustainable? Economists question if Fort Lauderdale's economy, tourism services, can support these new price levels. The push further north and west, map of South Florida expanding the search radius, West Palm Beach, Port St. Lucie, Cape Coral, Homestead. Personal story 3, a family with 2 kids who moved from Fort Lauderdale to Port St. Lucie. They have got more house, but the father now has a 90-minute commute. The trade-offs: community, time, fuel costs.
Okay, you qualify for $450,000. Now let's see how far you have to drive to find that. The rise of the drive until you qualify model. Realtors and mortgage brokers explain this harsh new calculus.
The strain on smaller cities. Officials from these receiving cities talk about the pressure on their schools, roads, and water resources. Historical footage, archival ads and videos of post-wide to Miami and Fort Lauderdale, promoting affordable bungalows and communities like Miami Springs. What is an entry-level home today? Tour of what $500,000 actually buys now. A small condo, a fixer-upper in a less desirable area, a townhouse far from job centers. The condo conundrum. Focus on the condo market, the last bastion of relative affordability. But with soaring HOA fees and special assessments, post-Surfside, the missing middle. Architects and urban planners discuss the zoning and construction of missing middle housing. Duplexes, townhomes, courtyard apartments that is largely illegal to build in vast swaths of South Florida. The essential worker squeeze, profiles of a nurse, a firefighter, and a restaurant owner. Can they live in the communities they serve? Intergenerational impacts, young adults living with parents into their 30s. Grandparents move in with adult children because they can't afford to retire here.
If we can't house our teachers, our police officers, our service staff, our entire economy is at risk. The threat to economic diversity. Business leaders and chambers of commerce express concern about hiring teachers, police officers, and service staff.
Personal story 4. A small business owner in Wynwood struggling to find housing for his employees considering shutting down. Narrator VO. As the housing crisis deepens, the search for solutions becomes a complex puzzle, fought on multiple fronts. At the local level, city and county governments are deploying a range of policy tools. In cities like Miami and Fort Lauderdale, this includes ambitious plans for affordable housing trusts. These are dedicated, locally controlled funds, often capitalized by fees on new commercial or luxury residential developments. The goal is to create a permanent, revolving source of capital to build and preserve housing that remains affordable for generations. Another key strategy is inclusionary zoning. In principle, it's a straightforward bargain. In exchange for the right to build, developers must set aside a percentage of their new units for low or moderate income households. These policies represent a direct attempt to harness the region's development boom for public good, ensuring that the prosperity that builds skylines also provides homes for the workers who sustain the city. But implementation is fraught with challenges. The number of units produced often pales in comparison to the overwhelming need, and navigating the bureaucracy can slow projects to a crawl. Narrator en percentivores tende andare VO. Perhaps the most significant hurdle for any new development is the NIMBY challenge, the not in my backyard phenomenon. Whenever proposals for denser housing emerge, they are often met with fierce community opposition. Angry resident on screen. No high-rises in our neighborhood. The objections are predictable and deeply felt. Fears of increased traffic, overcrowded schools, strained public services, and a change in the essential character of a beloved neighborhood. Residents who have invested their life savings into their homes worry about potential impacts on their property values. While these concerns are often valid, they create a powerful political force that can stall or kill projects designed to alleviate the very housing shortage that affects the entire region. It's a fundamental conflict between the desire to preserve the status quo of a single neighborhood and the region's collective urgent need for more housing supply. Narrator VO. Moving up to the state level, the political landscape is dominated by the story of Florida's Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Established in 1992 and funded by a small percentage of real estate transaction taxes, it was designed to be a dedicated source for housing programs across the state. However, for nearly 2 decades, the fund became the state legislature's go-to piggy bank. Year after year, lawmakers would sweep hundreds of millions of dollars from the Sadowski Fund to plug holes in the general budget, funding other priorities while the housing crisis worsened. This history of raids created deep mistrust among housing advocates. Recently, landmark legislation like the Live Local Act has aimed to reverse this trend, fully funding the trust and creating new incentives for affordable housing development. Yet, the legacy of those sweeps lingers, a stark reminder of how easily long-term housing goals can be sacrificed for short-term political fixes. Narrator, VO. Frustrated by the slow pace of traditional solutions, innovators are exploring alternative models, co-housing communities, which blend private homes with extensive shared spaces, foster a sense of community and can reduce costs. A more structural approach is found in community land trusts, or CLTs. Here's how it works. The trust, a non-profit organization, acquires and holds ownership of the land in perpetuity. It then sells or rents the homes on that land to lower-income residents at a reduced price. Because the high cost of the land is removed from the equation, the homes become and remain truly affordable. When a homeowner decides to sell, they sell the house back to the trust or to another income-qualified buyer at a restricted price, preserving the affordability for the next family. It's a powerful tool to combat gentrification and create permanently affordable homeownership, though scaling it up to meet demand remains a significant challenge. Narrator, VO. Technology also offers a glimmer of hope. On construction sites, new methods are being tested to bring down the astronomical cost of labor and materials. A look at modular and 3D printed home construction reveals a potential revolution in home building. Modular construction involves building sections of a home in a factory setting, which allows for greater efficiency and quality control before assembling them on site. Even more futuristic is 3D printing, where giant printers extrude concrete or other materials layer by layer to create the structure of a house in a matter of days, not months. While still in their early stages, these technologies promise to dramatically reduce construction time and waste, potentially making new homes faster and cheaper to build. The key question is whether these innovations can be scaled from pilot projects to mass production, delivering on their promise of affordability for the masses. Narrator, VO. While some focus on building new homes, another battle is being waged by those struggling to stay in the ones they already have. As rents soar alongside home prices, a new wave of tenant organizing has swept across South Florida. Footage of tenant unions and community groups demanding relief has become common. Their primary demand is often for rent stabilization, a policy that would limit the amount a landlord can increase rent each year. Tenant organizer. On screen. We need rent stabilization now. Proponents argue it's a necessary emergency measure to prevent mass displacement and provide stability for working families, seniors, and vulnerable residents. However, it remains one of the most contentious topics in Florida, where state law largely prohibits local governments from enacting rent control. Opponents, including landlord associations and many economists, warn that such caps stifle new construction, reduce the quality of existing housing stock by disincentivizing maintenance, and ultimately worsen the housing shortage they are meant to solve. This debate cuts to the core of the crisis, a clash between property rights and the fundamental human need for shelter. The promise of South Florida has always been one of reinvention. For generations, this sun-drenched coast was a beacon, a place to start over, to build a life, to trade snow shovels for sandals and carve out a personal paradise. It was a dream built not on extravagant wealth, but on the simple foundation of opportunity, a steady job, a safe neighborhood, and a home you could call your own. The landscape was a canvas, and the dream was accessible. But as the decades have turned, and the skyline has reached ever higher, a fundamental question now casts a long shadow over the sand. Who is this reinvention for? As the gates to this paradise become narrower and more gilded, who is being welcomed in, and who is being priced out of the very dream their parents and grandparents helped build? We've followed the journeys of those caught in this shifting landscape, the people who form the backbone of this community. We return to the teacher we met, a dedicated educator shaping young minds in the heart of Miami. Where is she now? She is still renting. The security of a home remains just out of reach, a constant source of anxiety in a profession already fraught with challenges. Her rent has increased another 10%, a now familiar annual ritual that forces a painful recalculation of her budget. She spends her evenings not relaxing, but scrolling through apartment listings, each one a stark reminder that her salary, earned serving the community's children, is no longer enough to afford a stable life within it. The dream of owning a home has been shelved. Now, the goal is simply to find an affordable place to rent, a search that pushes her further and further from the school and the community she loves. Her story is not one of failure, but a testament to a system where the numbers no longer add up for essential workers. The family who chased the horizon to Port St. Lucie is adjusting. They found their slice of the American dream, a yard for the kids, a mortgage they could manage, a sense of permanence. But this victory came with a heavy, unspoken cost, measured in miles and minutes. The father's commute, a grueling 3-hour round trip, has become the defining rhythm of their lives. He leaves before the sun is up and returns long after it is set, a ghost in his own family's story during the week. While the children's laughter fills the backyard, their father's exhaustion is a quiet, constant presence. They have a house, but they've sacrificed time. They have space, but they've traded it for proximity. They are living the drive until you qualify reality, a compromise that redefines what it means to be present, forcing them to ask if the dream is worth it when you're too tired to truly live it. And the small business owner whose cafe was once a neighborhood hub is hanging on. His doors are closed, the space now gutted and being remade in the sterile image of a national chain. He fought the rent hikes, he tried to adapt, but in the end, he was a casualty of the very revitalization that promised prosperity. He hasn't given up entirely. He's exploring options, perhaps a food truck or a smaller spot in a less desirable location. But the soul of his business was tied to the community he served. A community that is itself being dismantled and displaced. He watches as the unique character of his street is scrubbed away, replaced by a homogeneous and expensive landscape that caters to a new, transient clientele. He's not just mourning a business, he's mourning the loss of a neighborhood's identity. This is the paradox of modern South Florida. As we zoom out from a classic, now $1 million Miami bungalow, the glittering, unaffordable skyline of Brickell rises behind it like a monument to a new era. It's a city that has become a global brand, a luxury product marketed to the highest bidder. The economy is booming, cranes dot the sky, and wealth flows in from every corner of the globe. But this boom is a wave that threatens to wash away the very foundations it was built upon. The teachers, the nurses, the artists, the entrepreneurs, the families who gave this region its vibrant, multicultural soul. The entry-level home, the humble starter condo, the fixer-upper that was a foothold for a previous generation. These are becoming relics of a bygone era, artifacts in a museum of affordability. The desire for a place in the sun has not diminished, it has intensified, creating a fierce global competition for every square foot of this land. The future of South Florida will be determined by the choices made today. Will it continue on its path toward becoming an exclusive enclave, a playground for the wealthy with a transient service class commuting from the fringes? Or will its leaders and residents find the will to innovate, to build, and to legislate a more inclusive vision? Can it create pathways for the next generation to put down roots? The dream isn't gone, but for so many who call this place home, it has been deferred, displaced, and radically redefined. It is no longer a promise waiting to be fulfilled, but a question hanging in the humid air. Is there still a place for us here?
In our last video, we diagnosed the problem. We talked about how Miami lost the starter home. Skyrocketing prices, investor speculation, soaring insurance costs, and zoning that favored luxury towers over humble bungalows. It felt like the dream of owning a simple home for your family was shipped off to another zip code, permanently. But today, we're not here to mourn. We're here to talk about the comeback. This is how Miami can reclaim the starter home. And it's not about magic or miracles. It's about choices, policy, and a bit of Miami ingenuity. To solve Miami's housing crisis, the first and perhaps most crucial step doesn't involve a single bulldozer or zoning change. It happens right here, in our minds. Step 1 is a fundamental mindset shift. For generations, the American dream, especially here in sunny South Florida, was painted with a very specific brush. The classic 1950s standalone house on a big lot model. A patch of green grass to call your own, a 2-car garage, and a white picket fence, or, in our case, maybe a lush row of hibiscus. It's a powerful, deeply ingrained image, but we have to be honest with ourselves. In much of Miami-Dade, with land costs what they are, that specific version of the dream, well, that ship has sailed for starter home prices. Let's break down the math. When you buy a traditional single-family home, you're not just buying the structure, you're buying the land underneath it. And in a geographically constrained, globally desirable place like Miami, land is the ultimate luxury good. Its value has skyrocketed, far outpacing wage growth. This means that even for a modest older home, the price is overwhelmingly dictated by the dirt it sits on. For a new construction home, the land can easily account for more than half the total cost before a single foundation is poured. This isn't a failure of ambition on the part of young families. It's a failure of geometry. We simply can't create more land. So, if we want to create more opportunities for homeownership, we have to use the land we have more efficiently. We have to expand our idea of what a starter home can be. This brings us to a concept urban planners call the missing middle. It's all the housing types that fit, both in scale and density, between a single-family home and a big mid-rise apartment tower. These aren't radical new inventions. They're housing types that built many of America's most beloved walkable neighborhoods a century ago. We just stopped building them. A starter home can be a townhome, with its own front door and a small private patio, sharing walls with neighbors to dramatically reduce land and construction costs. It can be a beautifully designed duplex, triplex, or fourplex, where you own your unit and share a yard, looking no different from the single-family homes next door. It can be a modest condo in a smaller 3- or 4-story building nestled into a walkable neighborhood, putting you steps from cafes, parks, and transit. Or it could be a cottage court, a cluster of small, detached homes oriented around a shared green space, fostering a close-knit community. The key here is that these options provide ownership and equity building potential at a price point that is simply unattainable with the single-family model. This isn't about lowering quality. In fact, new construction of this type is often more resilient and energy efficient than older homes. It's about increasing options and efficiency. It's about giving people the choice to trade a large private yard they may not have time to maintain for a lower mortgage and a vibrant neighborhood they can walk in. And this shift offers more than just financial benefits. It reintroduces a sense of community that has been lost in many sprawling suburbs. When you have shared amenities, a common green, a playground, a community garden, you naturally interact with your neighbors. You build relationships. Children have built-in playmates, and parents have a support network right outside their door. These aren't anonymous towers. They are communities at a human scale. This model also supports a more sustainable, healthier lifestyle. With gentle density comes increased walkability. Local businesses have more customers, making it viable to have a corner store, a bakery, or a coffee shop just a short stroll away. This reduces our reliance on cars for every single errand, which means less traffic, cleaner air, and more daily physical activity. This mindset shift also means seeing our existing neighborhoods not as fragile relics to be frozen in time, but as living, breathing ecosystems that can gently evolve. This is where another powerful tool comes in: the accessory dwelling unit, or ADU. Think of it as a small secondary home on the same lot as a primary residence, a backyard cottage, a garage conversion, or a small apartment above the garage. For a homeowner, an ADU can provide a new stream of rental income, helping to pay the mortgage, or it can provide a home for an aging parent or an adult child, keeping families close. For the community, ADUs add new housing options that are, by their nature, more affordable and integrated directly into the fabric of the neighborhood without changing its visual character from the street. Adding a small ADU in a backyard or converting a single underused lot into a few townhomes isn't destroying the neighborhood's character. It's actually preserving it by allowing the people who give a community its character to actually afford to live there. We're talking about our teachers, our nurses, our firefighters, our artists, and our young families. They are the lifeblood of a community. When they are forced to move farther and farther away due to cost, the community itself begins to weaken. Embracing this new, more flexible vision of home is the first, most vital step toward building a more affordable, equitable, and vibrant Miami for everyone. Shifting our mindset is the essential first step, but a change of heart won't build a single home. To turn aspiration into asphalt and drywall, we need a robust policy toolkit. This isn't about one magic bullet. It's a coordinated strategy with 3 core pillars. First, rewriting the rules of what can be built and where. Second, using financial tools to encourage the housing we need. And third, slashing the bureaucratic red tape that makes building a test of endurance. Let's start with the foundation: zoning reformation. Think of zoning as the operating system for a city. For decades, the zoning code across Miami-Dade has overwhelmingly favored the single-family home, making our city less affordable and walkable. We need concrete policy. Cities like Miami and Hialeah must legalize missing middle housing by right. By right is key. It means if a builder proposes a duplex or small apartment that fits pre-approved rules, they get to build it. No more years-long political battles just to build a few homes. This isn't about putting a high-rise in a quiet cul-de-sac. It's about strategic, gentle density, allowing duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes on lots currently reserved for one expensive house. It means upzoning our commercial corridors, like Flagler or Bird Road, for mixed-use buildings with shops below and apartments above, creating vibrant 15-minute neighborhoods. We can also embrace form-based codes, which focus on how a building fits into the neighborhood, ensuring new construction is beautiful and human-scaled. By changing these rules, we create a vast new supply of land for more varied and naturally affordable homes without touching the Everglades. But legalizing new housing isn't enough. The market often defaults to luxury condos. So our second tool is to incentivize the good and disincentivize the bad. We must tilt the playing field toward the housing our communities need. How? First, offer meaningful tax abatements or density bonuses for developers who build true starter homes. A density bonus allows more units on a piece of land, but only if a percentage are set aside as affordable. These incentives need guardrails, strict caps on square footage and sale price. This ensures we're subsidizing homes for nurses and teachers, not just cheaper luxury condos. To lock in that affordability, we can attach deed restrictions that keep the home affordable for a generation, say 30 years. This prevents a subsidized home from being immediately flipped for profit. Now, for the other side, disincentivizing speculation. We can implement higher transfer taxes for non-owner-occupied purchases or quick flips. If an investor buys and sells a property within 2 years, a speculation tax could capture that profit and redirect it into an affordable housing fund. The goal is simple: make it more profitable to build for local families than to sell to hedge funds. It's about aligning market forces with community needs. So we've changed the zoning and created incentives. But a third barrier can stop even the best projects: the bureaucratic maze of permitting. Our third policy is to cut the red tape. Right now, the time it takes to get a project approved in South Florida is insane. It can take years, navigating a labyrinth of departments and delays. This isn't just an annoyance, it's a direct driver of cost. Every month a project is delayed adds thousands in carrying costs, which are passed on to the homebuyer. The solution is a top-to-bottom streamlining of the process. For projects that meet our starter home criteria, we should offer a fast-track, priority permitting lane. We can create a library of pre-approved plans for structures like accessory dwelling units or ADUs. If a homeowner chooses one, their permit should be issued in weeks, not months. We need true one-stop shop permitting centers where a builder deals with all departments under one roof. And finally, we need certainty. Cities should offer guaranteed review timelines. If the city doesn't provide feedback on a plan within, say, 60 days, it's deemed approved. This forces efficiency and gives builders predictability. Remember, time is money. Every day we shave off the permitting process makes housing a little more attainable for a family in Miami. Let's be real. Two existential threats are insurance and infrastructure. You can build a $300K townhome, but if the annual insurance is $15K, it's not affordable. We need state-level reform, curbing litigation abuse, strengthening homes, and honestly, leveraging public risk pools to stabilize the market. It's a statewide fight, but mayors and commissioners need to be the loudest voices in Tallahassee demanding change. And infrastructure. We can't just add homes without adding transportation. Reclaiming the starter home means fighting for connected, walkable neighborhoods with reliable public transit. Every new missing middle project should be paired with improvements to sidewalks, bike lanes, and bus frequency. Density without mobility is a recipe for gridlock and misery. Policy is top-down, but the real change is bottom-up. This is about community prioritization. Neighborhood associations need to advocate for their kids and local workers, not just against change. It means supporting local developers and community land trusts, nonprofits that build homes and keep them affordable forever, taking them off the speculative market. It's about choosing leaders at the city and county level who see housing as a core issue, not a side issue. It's about being willing to say, a little more density on this major corridor is worth it if it means my barista can live near her work. We've spent this time looking at the anatomy of a crisis, how the dream of a starter home in Miami slipped through our fingers. But the most important takeaway isn't about what we've lost. It's about what we can and must build next. Reclaiming the starter home won't happen overnight. It's a generational effort, a conscious decision to reverse a decades-long trend. It requires courage from politicians, creativity from builders, and sustained, focused pressure from all of us. This isn't a single-front war. It's a coordinated campaign that needs to be fought on every level, from the halls of City Hall to our own neighborhood streets. So, let's recap the battle plan. First, the City of Miami and Miami-Dade County hold the most powerful tools. They must lead the charge on zoning reform. That means ending the stranglehold of single-family-only zoning along our transit corridors and in our urban core. It means legalizing the missing middle housing we've talked so much about, the duplexes, the townhomes, the small apartment buildings that offer a foothold on the ladder of home ownership. It means implementing form-based codes that focus on creating great walkable places, not just on separating uses. And it means getting smart with incentives. We need to reward the builders who do the right thing. That looks like density bonuses and tax abatements tied directly to building smaller, more affordable units. It means fast-tracking permits for projects that meet our affordability goals and making it radically simple for homeowners to build an ADU in their backyard. We have to make building a starter home the easiest and most profitable thing a developer can do in this city. Second, we need action from Tallahassee. The state legislature has a critical role to play, especially when it comes to the two elephants in the room: insurance and infrastructure. The current property insurance crisis is an anchor dragging down affordability for everyone. State-level reforms are non-negotiable. We need to strengthen public risk pools, aggressively fund home mitigation programs to make our housing stock more resilient, and demand transparency from insurance carriers. A stable insurance market is the bedrock of a stable housing market. Simultaneously, the state must become a true partner in funding the infrastructure that makes density work. More housing means more people. And more people without better transit means gridlock. We need significant state investment in expanding metro rail, in creating dedicated bus rapid transit lanes, and in funding the safe sidewalks and protected bike lanes that give people real alternatives to their cars. We can't just zone for density. We have to build the connected communities that make it desirable. Third, and perhaps most importantly, is the role of the community. Policy is just paper without people to champion it. This is where grassroots power comes in. We need to support and scale up the work of community land trusts, which take land off the speculative market forever to create permanently affordable homes. We need to explore limited equity co-ops, a model that allows residents to build wealth while keeping housing costs down for the next generation. And we need a mindset shift in our neighborhood associations. For too long, the default response to any new development has been no. We need to nurture a new kind of civic engagement, a yes-in-my-backyard movement that champions gentle density, that advocates for the fourplex on the corner, that welcomes the new neighbors a small apartment building can bring. It's about seeing new housing not as a threat to our neighborhood's character, but as an essential ingredient for its future vitality. Finally, this brings us to you. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of such a massive challenge. But the truth is, the entire system we've described is built on the choices and actions of individuals. You have a voice. Show up to that city commission meeting when they're debating a zoning change. Write an email to your state representative about insurance reform. Use your vote to support pro-housing candidates who aren't just talking about the problem, but are offering concrete solutions. Change the conversation with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Talk about the nurse, the firefighter, the barista who can't afford to live in the city they serve. Frame this not as an abstract economic issue, but as a moral one. We traded starter homes for investor portfolios and luxury condos because the market followed the incentives. Now, we have to change the incentives with our voices, our votes, and our collective will. It's not about going back to a nostalgic past. It's about building a new, smarter, more inclusive version of the Miami dream. One where if you work hard in this city, you can afford to put down roots in this city. A Miami where our children don't have to move away to find their first home. A Miami that is vibrant, diverse, and accessible to all. That is the future we can build together. So, what do you think? Which of these solutions resonates most with you? The policy toolkit, the community-led initiatives, the state-level reforms. Which crucial ideas did we miss? This can't be a monologue. It has to be a dialogue. Let's get this vital conversation going in the comments below. Your perspective is part of the solution. And if you believe that every city deserves to be a place where its people can thrive, then subscribe to our channel. We're just getting started exploring how cities across the country are fighting this fight. Thank you for watching.